Welcome to Point in Time 101, part of the orientation for the Point in Time Unsheltered Count that will take place in Racine County, Wisconsin. This video covers the following topics. PIT basics. We'll talk about the who, what, when, where, why, and how of point in time, although not necessarily in that order. PIT and you. We'll discuss your role as a team member participating in the Point in Time Unsheltered Count. PIT safety. Safety first, we will discuss some of the risks that you might encounter during point in time and how to stay safe. PIT logistics. How do you prepare for the night of count? Other PIT stuff. We'll introduce the schedule for the night of count and some final do's and don'ts of point in time. Before we really get going here, let's just go over a couple of terms you might hear during orientation. COC. COC stands for Continuum of Care. A continuum of care is a regional or local planning body that coordinates housing and services and the related funding for families and individuals experiencing homelessness. Racine COC organizes the annual point-in-time count. HMIS. This stands for Homeless Management Information System. It's used to collect client-level data and data on the provision of housing and services to individuals and families experiencing homelessness. HUD. That would be the Department of Housing and Urban Development. HUD has many programs, but Point in Time is related to HUD's COC program that is designed to promote community-wide commitment to the goal of ending homelessness by providing funding for efforts by nonprofit providers and state and local governments, and by providing access to programs by homeless individuals and families. Night of Count. Night of Count is what we call the night when Point in Time takes place. PIT. PIT's just an acronym for point in time, has nothing to do with pit stops at the Indianapolis 500 or Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, although Pittsburgh will also be doing PIT. Unsheltered. Unsheltered is a living situation in which someone is living in a place not meant for human habitation. Okay, let's kick off this part of your point in time Unsheltered Count orientation.
So now, let's start with PIT basics. What's point in time? Point in time is an annual count of people experiencing homelessness. It's called a point in time because it only counts the people who are homeless at a specific time, rather than across a longer period of time, like a month or year. It's like a snapshot of people waiting at a bus stop. You can see the people who are there at the bus stop at the moment you take the photo. What you don't see who was at the bus stop earlier in the day or who arrived after you took the photo. Point in time provides the best estimate of the number of people experiencing homelessness at the time of the count, locally, at the state level, and across the United States. Who do we count during point in time? During point in time, we count people who are experiencing homelessness according to the definition used by HUD, which comes from the HEART Act. People who are residing in various forms of emergency shelter, including motel voucher programs, are considered homeless. Those living in transitional housing programs for people who are homeless are also included. The combination of emergency shelter and transitional housing is called the sheltered count portion of point in time. Point in time also counts people who are living in places not meant for human habitation on the night of count. This is the part of point in time that we call the unsheltered count. This orientation is for those of you who will be participating in Racine's Unsheltered Count. Who don't we count during point in time? Because the count is specifically focused on people experiencing homelessness according to the HUD definition, there are some people who we do not count during point in time. These include people who are renting, people who are doubled up and staying with friends or family in a house or an apartment, people who would stay in motels that are paying for their own stay or have it paid for by another source that is not a shelter program or a charitable organization. People who live in residential and transitional housing situations that do not have a homeless criteria. This might include sober living houses, transitional housing provided by the Department of Corrections, group homes, rehabilitation facilities, and places like that. We also don't count random people who are out on the streets without any specific indication that they may be homeless. Not everyone engaged in a street activity or walking around at night is homeless and unsheltered. Part of our role in point in time is to identify people who are actually spending the night in a place not meant for human habitation. When do we conduct point in time? One of the point in time requirements is that it must be conducted within the last 10 days of January. COCs around the United States are allowed to set their own dates, but it must be within that time frame. It takes place at the end of the month because that is when some households become less stable and could become homeless as their resources run out. It takes place in the winter months because the people living in places not meant for human habitation when it becomes cold are less likely to have what they consider viable shelter options. There are 4 COCs in Wisconsin: Milwaukee County, Dane County, Racine County, and everyone else, which is called the Balance of State COC. We all conduct our point-in-time counts on the 4th Wednesday of January. This helps prevent people who move back and forth between counties from being counted twice in the same point in time. The count always takes place late at night to help make it easier to determine who is sleeping in a place not meant for human habitation that night. You often can't tell by what people look like or where they are during the day. Where does point in time take place? The sheltered portion of the count takes place at the shelters and transitional housing programs. In Racine, we currently have 4 shelters that are counted during point in time. Halo, a general shelter for men, women, and families with children. Women's Resource Center, a shelter for people fleeing domestic violence. TLC, a shelter for women and families in the western end of the county. And Safe Haven, a shelter for children in crisis who are under 18 years old. Transitional housing programs in Racine include Bethany Apartments for victims of domestic violence and the Veterans Home Grant Per Diem program in Union Grove for veterans. The Unsheltered Count takes place all across Racine County as teams search for people living in places not meant for human habitation that night. How do we conduct point in time? Shelters and transitional housing programs take a census count of who is in shelter on the night of count, and they enter it into HMIS. Shelters and transitional housing programs that do not use HMIS use an equivalent program or a special PIT survey tool to record who is in shelter on the night of count. The Unsheltered Count takes place through a form of street outreach. Teams go out to locate, approach, and make contact with people who may be unsheltered. If they find someone who reports being unsheltered, they ask permission to conduct a survey. Then they use the PIT survey tool to conduct a brief interview, or they use the tool to make an observation after leaving the person if the person declined to do the interview or they were unable to do it for other reasons. After the night of count, the data collected is cleaned up for accuracy and it is deduplicated to ensure that no individual is counted twice. Then, the data from various parts of the count are consolidated into Racine's point-in-time report, which we send to HUD in February. Why do we bother with point-in-time? Point-in-time helps us understand the nature and extent of homelessness, both on a single night and by comparing trends across multiple points in time over the years. The information collected helps identify resources needed. For example, do more or less resources need to be allocated to assist a certain subpopulation or household type of people experiencing homelessness, such as families with children, veterans, youth, victims of domestic violence, and groups like that. Point in time is also part of federal regulations and requirements for communities that use federal funds designated for people experiencing homelessness. The data from each point in time is consolidated into the annual Homeless Assessment Report that is submitted to Congress.
Kate, and you, what will you be doing as part of a team conducting the Unsheltered point-in-time count in Racine? Your team will be covering your assigned area. Racine uses a census methodology for point-in-time, meaning we will count each person we find on the night of count who we determine to be experiencing homelessness by the HUD definition. Some communities with large homeless populations use sampling methodologies, but we don't do that in Racine. We also use a complete coverage methodology. We don't just go where we know people have been unsheltered recently. We cover as much of Racine County as realistically possible. There are some places where we have never found someone to be unsheltered. We still go there because we never know. This night of count just might be the first time. Your point-in-time team will cover your assigned area to the best of your ability to identify anyone who is unsheltered there and thereby do your part to contribute to the most accurate pit count possible.
Your team will be locating people who might be unsheltered. Your task on the night of count will be to locate people who are sleeping in places not meant for human habitation that night. Unfortunately, they usually don't have a neon sign over them with an arrow saying, "Look here." You will have to identify places in your assigned area where people might sleep at night and look there. Some principles and ideas of how and where to look are included in the street outreach video that is a separate part of this orientation. Your point-in-time materials will have your assigned area and some points of interest in it, but it's not exhaustive. Study the maps that are provided and study your area using Google Maps before the night of count to think of the places where you might look. Keep your eyes open while you're out, not only for people you might approach, but also for places you see that might need some closer investigation. Your team will be approaching people who may be unsheltered. Because we're using a census methodology and we want the most accurate count possible, once you see someone who you think might be unsheltered, it's not enough just to see them from a distance. You need to approach the person and attempt to speak to them. The key to making an approach to someone you don't know in the night is to do it in a way that helps the person determine as quickly as possible that you are not a threat to their safety or ability to remain where they are. This is discussed with some examples in the street outreach video that's part of this orientation. Your team will be determining a current living situation. If you're going to count someone in your area as unsheltered, you'll need to determine if they meet the homeless definition and are sleeping in a place not meant for human habitation on the night of count. This isn't always easy. You may or may not be surprised to find out that people who are not unsheltered will say that they are homeless. This is very common among people who are doubled up, and it reflects how they experience their living situations. Also surprising is that our street outreach team in Racine sometimes encounters people who are clearly unsheltered, but specifically say that they are not homeless. They often believe that homelessness refers to chronically homeless individuals who have certain characteristics that they don't share, despite the fact that the person is sleeping in a place not meant for human habitation. The main takeaway from this is that the word homeless is not particularly useful for point in time. You want to determine if someone is sleeping in a place not meant for human habitation. If they tell you that they're staying in a place not meant for human habitation, or that they plan to stay in a place not meant for human habitation, or that they don't have any specific place to stay or go on the night of count, you can accept that answer for point in time purposes. If the person does not report being unsheltered, either because what the person said wasn't clear or you weren't able to talk to the person, you can still count the person if you have a strong reason to believe that the person is unsheltered. For example, you actually see the person sleeping in a place not meant for human habitation. Your team will be offering shelter. If someone reports that they're spending the night in a place not meant for human habitation, ask them if they want to go to shelter. If they do want to enter shelter, then call the team responsible for assisting with shelter entry on the night of count and wait with the person who is experiencing homelessness until the shelter team arrives and they depart for shelter. You do not need to conduct a survey in this case. The person will enter shelter that night and be counted as part of the sheltered count component of point in time. Your team will be surveying or making observations. If you meet someone who reports sleeping in a place not meant for human habitation on the night of count who does not want to go to shelter, that's okay. Most people we meet on the streets decline shelter, even when it's cold. After you have explained point in time, you'll ask them if they would consent to take part in a brief, confidential interview that will assist the count. If they consent, conduct the survey using the survey tool on a phone. A video on how to use the survey tool and a link to a demo version are separate components of this orientation. If the person does not consent to a survey, that's also okay. Feel free to provide the person with any outreach supplies your team has and use the survey tool to complete an observation after you have left the person. If you weren't able to speak to the person for some reason, for example, they were sleeping and wouldn't wake up, you can also fill out an observation. Make sure you include why you believe the person may be unsheltered and any other details. A special team will follow up later on the night of count, and the regular street outreach team will follow up over the next couple of days. If you see a place where someone may have been sleeping, such as a tent or a makeshift shelter or a bunch of blankets and personal belongings, go ahead and make an observation and describe the area and its location. The teams will also follow up on this. Your team will be showing respect. Most important of all, remember that you will be going out to meet with people who may be having the most challenging experience of their life. And remember that they didn't call you to come visit them. You're going into their space. Show a high level of respect to everyone you meet, remembering that homelessness is a situation, and that people you meet are more than the situations you see them in at any given time.
Picked safety. How do you keep yourself safe while out on the streets during point in time? Dress appropriately. It's usually cold during point in time, and you might be walking outside. Dress as warmly as possible. You're going to be at the venue in a vehicle and walking around for a few hours, so dress comfortably. You might be walking through areas where there are branches that can tear clothes, burrs that stick to scarves and gloves, and possibly mud depending on the temperature. Don't wear your best clothes. Work as a team and wear reflective vests. You're part of a point-in-time street outreach team for the Unsheltered Count. Stay together as a team, which is always at least 2 members. If you have a larger team and split up to go check an area, stay together in pairs. Don't go doing any Lone Ranger or Rambo kind of things. Stay together. Some reflective vests will be provided. Wear them so that you can easily be seen by vehicles, other team members, and the people that you might approach on the streets. Understand the primary risks. When people think about being on the streets at night, they often believe that it must be dangerous. It can be, but usually not in the way people are thinking. Some of the primary risks experienced by teens on the streets are falling down, slipping on ice, tripping over a rock or a stick, stumbling down a hill, losing balance while you're walking across uneven ground, and things like that are definitely the most common risk experienced by a Racine street outreach team. Move cautiously and carefully, especially when ice might be present. Tree branches. If you move through the woods, it's easy to get a tree branch in your face. Leave distance between you and the person in front of you so that any branches snap back into place before your face gets there. Other drivers. Drivers speed, they run red lights, they run stop signs, and they do other things that could cause an accident. It's at night and the bars are closing. Assume that many of the people on the road might be driving while intoxicated. Drive very defensively. Animals. Racine Street Outreach Team has encountered rabbits, raccoons, possum, feral cats, birds, skunks, otters, deer, foxes, coyotes, and even a beaver while they were out on the streets. So far, they have all either run away or they just stand and stare from a distance. Just don't corner animals and stay out of their way, and you should be fine. The only animal that could really be a threat might be a coyote, and if you see one that gets very close, don't run, just make a lot of noise while looking at it. But from the team's experience, coyotes mostly keep their distance whenever the street outreach team has seen them. Criminal activity. The street outreach team does run into people engaged in some illegal activities during street outreach, but so far never anything violent. The team's never been attacked by people on the streets, and if there's a place that you don't want to go because it looks like it might not be safe, just don't go there. And finally, as always, if there's an emergency or a life-threatening situation, call 911. Remember the safety code word. We do use a safety code word that allows us to easily let other members know if you feel that you're in a situation that is unsafe and that the team should leave. The primary use is when you're with people you've met on the streets and you feel that there might be a safety threat of some kind. If you hear the code word, you leave. You can debrief about the situation after you've left. Our safety code word is the name Elmer. Anytime the name Elmer is heard, it means everyone must break off any engagement, go back to the vehicle, and leave the area. The code word can be used in a sentence. For example, hey, I got a text from Elmer and we need to go there. Or, hey guys, we're late for that meeting with Elmer. Or something like that. Even though it sounds like a fun thing to make a joke about, don't make jokes about the safety code word. If you hear it or have to use it, everyone needs to know that it is a potentially serious issue and that it's time to go. Over the last 10 years, Racine Street Outreach Team has made thousands of individual contacts with people on the streets at night, both unsheltered and just people doing things on the streets. So far, the team has never had to use the safety code word, but we all need to know it in case we have to use it someday on point in time on the streets and street outreach. And finally, one of the best ways to stay safe out on the streets is just to stay alert and to look out for your teammates' well-being. If it's icy out, keep reminding your teammates, hey, watch out for the ice. Let's not slip on the ice. It keeps reminding people of some of these main risks that we have. If you're leading as you're walking through the dark and you see a hole, tell the friends on your team, watch out, there's a hole up here, or there's some kind of obstacle up here, and keep each other aware of what risks might be around you as a team. All in all, let's be safe out there.
Pit logistics. The night of count schedule. Doors open at the venue at 9:30 p.m. If you'd like to arrive early, you're more than welcome to come in then and get settled in as the team sets things up for the night. In-person registration opens at 10 p.m. When you register, it lets us know who was there with us on the night of count. There'll be something to eat before and during the night of count orientation. We usually have coffee, sandwiches, and pizza. So it's a good time to hang out with folks, meet people, and assemble your team. At 10:30 p.m., we will officially open the night with a few words of welcome, followed by an additional orientation on the night of count. After that final orientation, you'll head out to the streets with your team until 3 a.m. or when you're confident that you have completely and fully covered your assigned area to the best of your ability. When you get back to the venue, you'll check in with the welcome team there, tell them about what you experienced and any surveys and observations you recorded, and return any equipment and unused supplies before heading home to try to get some sleep. Contact information. You will receive contact information for emergency services and the support team that can assist you on the night of count. This includes the shelter entry team that will assist people with a ride to Halo and entry into Halo if they choose to go there. It also includes numbers to call if you have questions about the survey tool, if you need extra supplies, or you have questions about how to do outreach or some particular situation that you found on the streets. Make sure that you take this contact information with you as you head out. Team members are also encouraged to share their phone numbers with each other in case they get separated somehow during the count. Outreach supplies. You will receive some outreach supplies on the night of count to provide anyone who is unsheltered and declines to enter shelter that night. These include things like socks, blankets, hand warmers, and things like that. If you use all of your supplies and need more, you can call the support team and they'll get some out to you. What to bring to pit. Bring warm, comfortable clothes and footwear. Bring your charged phone. Bring your ID. Bring good observation skills. Bring energy and compassion, and make sure you've got a ride home at the end of the night.
Other pit stuff. The do's and don'ts of pit. Here's a reminder of some basic do's and don'ts for the point in time unsheltered count. Do get consent before asking pit survey questions. Do remember that you may be entering into someone's personal and private space. Do have a conversation with the people that you interview. And do respect people's time. Don't take personal photos of or with the people you survey. Don't ask questions in a way that assumes you know the answer. Let the person speak for themselves. Don't insert yourself into the person's story. It's not about you. Let the person tell their story if they choose to do so. Don't force people to answer questions that they don't want to answer. Don't promise anything that you can't deliver. Questions and support. If you have a question about Point in Time before the night of count, you can email the Point in Time Workgroup Chair or email racine.coc.pit@gmail.com. During the night of count, you'll have the opportunity to ask questions before we head out to the streets, both when we meet as a group and also as individuals before you leave. Once you are out on the streets, there's still a support team. You can call them on the numbers listed in the contact information provided for the night of count. So that's basically it. Go through the various outreach videos, be prepared for some additional orientation fun on the night of count, and you will be ready to hit the streets as Racine counts in Point in Time.